Clause 4.2, understanding the needs and expectations of interested parties. At first glance, this subclause can seem heavy going, but let me explain to you how, number one, worthwhile it is to actually go and do what, and secondly then, how straightforward it is or can be. Let's get into it. Firstly, let's consider this term, interested parties. Years and years ago, when I was getting into business first, into corporate, the loyalty was really to the shareholders, to the owners, ultimately, and it was always about shareholders. And then this more ethical idea came along of stakeholders. And they said, well, it's not just about the owners of the organization. It's about the suppliers and the customers and the employees and the contractors and the joint ventures. And the stakeholder, the net got thrown out a bit wider. And then in 2015, this is the most recent version of 9001, this concept of interested parties was brought in. And really the net got thrown out much, much further than this. So let's get into it now. And I'm going to just make a slight grammar change to make it a bit more readable, just at the middle of it. Due to their effect or potential effect on the organization's ability to consistently provide products and services that meet customer and applicable statutory and regulatory requirements, the organization shall determine, right? A, the interested parties that are relevant to the quality management system, and B, the requirements of these parties that are relevant to the quality management system. The organisation shall monitor and review information about these interested parties and their relevant requirements. So look, what it's saying here is that as part of this subclause, you in your organisation need to throw out that net. And number one is identify all these interested parties. Now, yes, there's generic ones, as I said, like supplier and customer and client, contractor, employee, all of it. But consider also everywhere there's any regulation or authority required. You have, there's law, employment law, there's environmental law, all of these, there's GDPR, which is regulatory, is not optional. So the first thing to do is get the obvious ones and the regulatory ones, list all of them off. Who are these interested parties? And then beyond that, then there's maybe ones that are not so obvious. The clause talks about, like, or not talks about, but expects you to consider things like parent companies, non-government agencies, neighbours. I'll get into that in a minute. Employees, as I said, other workers, community groups, trade unions, professional bodies, and then your own particular ones. Just consider one for like neighbours. If you operate a quarry or you have a factory and there's noise, now I don't mean noise that would affect employees' health and safety, but let's say you're out far from everywhere, a Montessori school opens up next door. Well then, these are interested parties because you have to take cognizance of what you're doing that could impact them. So professional bodies. So even though you're regulatory, you may be required to adhere to certain codes of practice, etc. But your professional body might put extra on you way beyond what the authorities or the regulatory bodies have. It's voluntary to be a member, but in becoming a member, these are requirements that you need to adhere to. Now, the clause also then says, list them all first. Then identify what the needs are, the particular needs as the requirements of these interested parties are, and list each one of them off. The third step is to monitor information about these interested parties and their requirements. So it's not just that you list them and list the needs and then put it away and that's it, that's a piece of work done. No, it says monitor. A monitor is really an ongoing thing. When you put a monitor on something, it's looking at it on an ongoing basis. And then it says, and review information about these interested parties. So the review is at some point in time or several times in the year, or sometimes I just take stock and say, let's look at our interested parties again. Are there new ones? Are there ones that we can remove? Or are the needs and expectations still the same? That it's requiring you to actually be proactive in that. Now, another word of note areas, remember, this is high level. This is strategic. This is how you're operating in the environment like we talked about in 4.1, internal and external, and strategically or at high level, what are these requirements? It's not talking about a particular product or service and the particular service requires something to be built in a certain way. It's not that. It's about how you work in the environment you're in and how you have these business relationships with your interested parties, your stakeholders all around you. So remember that up at a strategic level here now, it's about how businesses govern and how businesses run themselves. So that's it. 4.2, understanding the needs and expectations of interested parties.